good times just keep on rolling at Aston Villa. I thought I'd just do a quick update because Aston Villa have tonight, it's been linked heavily in Spanish media with Mateu Alemany, who is currently football director at Barcelona, the great Barcelona. And according to reports in Spain, Barcelona could not compete economically or sportingly with Aston Villa. My goodness, how far we have come. Aston Villa have apparently offered an astronomical amount of money to Alemany to work with at the club. So what does this suggest, really? Well, it suggests the owners are incredibly ambitious, as we've seen before. It would also suggest that they have learnt from the likes of Manchester City, right? So when Pep Guardiola joined Man City, it wasn't just that they got a genius coach. What also happened was that behind the scenes, Man City had been preparing for Guardiola's arrival for years because they went to Barcelona and they took Jiki Begiristain and Ferran Soriano, who had worked with Guardiola before at arguably the greatest, well, I would say the greatest club team of all time. But what it meant was that there was a sort of seamless transition for Guardiola then when he came into Manchester City, where he could work with people that he trusted. Now, Unai Emery has, according to reports in Spain, been involved with these talks with Alemany, and you would imagine that he would be heavily involved with that because he'd want to work with a sporting director he trusts, somebody who's on the same level with him. So I would call this an exciting move for sure. You look at his past. Started out in 1993 as CEO at Real Mallorca, where he spent most of his time, a good 17 years until the year, in and out at Real Mallorca until the year 2010, in a variety of roles. But what you would say about Real Mallorca is that, I watched La Liga a lot in those in the sort of early Sky years, I guess. And I remember Mallorca being a team that historically had not always been somebody you'd associate as being in La Liga. You'd see them in Segunda Liga, but with Alemany in place, they were regularly in La Liga. They won the Copa del Rey in 2003, and in 2000, Florentino Perez tried to bring him into Real Madrid, and at the time, Real Madrid were the Galactico era, same year that they signed Luis Figo from Barcelona, and they'd won the Champions League as well. So numerous times in those years as well. So, I think that's suggestive of how good he was then, how influential he was then, and also, Mallorca as well. You can't mention them in La Liga at that time without mentioning Samuel Eto'o, who was a fantastic player for them and somebody who was there when Alemany was a power broker at the club. Now, since then, he's been at Valencia from 2017 to 2019. It's an interesting one because in his time there, you would say that Valencia actually did all right. They got back into the top four, got into the Champions League. But he wasn't there very long. And in 2019 was let go, also a year in which they won the Copa del Rey. But the problem with Valencia is that Peter Lim, their chairman, the man who brought in Gary Neville as manager, is not a popular figure, and I would argue has not run that club well at all. And I would argue that Valencia, they've been struggling against a potential relegation this season. So I think that's suggestive of not necessarily a reflection on Alemany. In fact, it's probably a good reflection on him that Valencia did finish in the top four and did win the Copa del Rey, considering how soap opera it's been there for a long time. And he went from one soap opera to another when he went to Barcelona a couple of years ago. Now, Barcelona, he went there under Joan Laporta. Laporta was in charge during Barcelona's absolute golden era when Guardiola was there. Made some really great decisions at the time, you'd have to say. And now he's come back in. He's come in to replace Bartomeu, who you would say has done a terrible job at Barcelona. A man who panicked when they sold Neymar to PSG. Spent obscene amounts of money on the likes of Coutinho, giving them wages that, quite frankly, have come back to haunt Barcelona, because now their transfers are a bit dramatic, a bit confusing, don't make a huge amount of sense, and they're having to work with free transfers. But in the time that Alemany has been at Barcelona, look, they're on course to win La Liga this year, by all accounts. But, well, just looking at La Liga, they're on course to do it as long as they don't collapse. But, in the time that he's been at Barcelona, he sold the likes of Emerson Royal, 25 million. Junior Firpo to Leeds, 15 million. Trincao, he went to Wolves. I believe Wolves paid a loan fee of 6 million for him. Antoine Griezmann went as well to Atletico Madrid, and Coutinho went to Aston Villa for 17 million. So, he's had to make a lot of big decisions, and he's had to work in a very difficult environment wherein he's brought. And while he's been at Barcelona, he's obviously helped bring in Robert Lewandowski last season, but also Ferran Torres from Manchester City. Aubameyang went there and then went to Chelsea. Memphis Depay, not a huge success, you would say. Sergio Aguero, tragically, that got cut short. And then Eric Garcia was another player who went to Barcelona from Manchester City. So, look, he's a very experienced sporting director, you would say. Somebody who's coming in with a great pedigree. And the fact that the reports in Spain are saying that Barcelona, the great Barcelona, couldn't compete economically or sportingly with Aston Villa, I would argue that's a great sign. I think it's a fantastic sign for how the board are backing Unai Emery. And it feels a bit like they've given the keys to Unai Emery and said, you are the man. You do what you got to do. We're going to put the infrastructure in place to ensure that you can be as successful as you want to be. Because as I mentioned with Manchester City, it ain't just what happens on the pitch. It's what happens behind the scenes as well. And it's giving Unai Emery the very best conditions he can work in to bring the success to Aston Villa that we want to see. So I would say this looks like a positive move. We'll see how it turns out. You can't say it's going to work out perfectly because you never know. But given his pedigree and given the fact this looks like a move to back Unai Emery, I'd say this is a good thing for Aston Villa. Looking at it, I'll look to speak to other reporters about this. Speak to some Spanish reporters, hopefully some Barcelona people, get their perspective on it. Perhaps I'll have a totally different view on it than I did. Have some different ideas and facts about it as well. But yeah. Exciting time to be a Villa fan, isn't it? 4 games to go now in this season. Can we make it into Europe? It'd be a great first step. But what I will say as well is that whether we make Europe or we don't, this summer's going to be very, very exciting. Up the Villa.